Hi, my name is Moua, and I am the Vice President of Innovation here at blueprism. I'm excited that you had joined my session. In today's session, we will be talking about the 2020 trends of emerging technologies. This is an exciting time in history because there are a multitude of new technologies on the horizon that will dramatically change the world. Over my past 20 years, I've served in multiple capacities, from a software developer to data scientist, running transformation programs across the globe, and now leading the Innovation Center here at blueprism. So what we will be sharing is a perspective around how companies and organizations just like yours should be adopting and deploying new technologies. To begin this session, I want to make sure that folks understand where we're headed, specifically from an innovation standpoint. So I'm taking a quote here from Elon Musk. This happens to be the unveiling of SpaceX Starship. What's interesting about this is that this is the spaceship that will basically take humans to be a multi-planetary species over the next couple of decades. So this is a quote from that YouTube. If the design takes too long to build, it is the wrong design. The tendency is to overcomplicate things. So the question that Elon Musk and many organizations around the planet is, why is it so complicated? Why is innovation so hard? If it's so easy to think about new ideas and new creations, it should be fairly easy to deploy, which is our topic of discussion. So I am asking the audience to think about what this formula looks like. So innovation equals creativity plus implementation. While there's many organizations on the planet that has great ideas, you and I have great ideas, the implementation of it is actually very, very difficult. On this slide, what you're also seeing is the number 1, 6, 41, 100, 7, and 500. And as a former data scientist, what I was looking at is how do I correlate all this data set to be able to find why it's so hard to innovate, and then also how to adopt new technologies. So when we start to peel back the onion, per se, and looking at the data here, specifically, if we look at that number 1% of all organizations on the planet can commercialize an idea. That number is actually less than 1%, but we just rounded up to 1%. We'll talk about that in a minute. What's interesting is that the top 10 global companies on the planet, 6 of them are tech firms, such as Microsoft, Amazon, and many others, as well as Apple, to facilitate these technologies that's up and coming. The next number that you see on the left-hand side is this 41%. 41% of jobs, and this is a study by the Harvard Business Journal, will no longer exist, which is interesting because we are in a post-COVID-19 situation. Yes, here in the United States, there's about 40 million people that are unemployed, as well as there's many unemployment situations occurring all over the planet. So some of those jobs may not be coming back. And that's an uncertainty for just the working class people and just average everyday people. But what's also interesting is this $100 billion of productivity increase. This just happens to be a US number alone. So over the next 3 to 5 years, it's projected that the average business is looking to increase their productivity by $100 billion. And as we go through the statistics on this screen, what's interesting is also that number 7, lucky number 7, 7 career changes in an average person's life. I myself have made multiple career changes, just like I'm sure you are going through. And what's interesting is that these career changes also is impacted by, again, emerging technologies. So how do we correlate all this data and then facilitate this 500 million new jobs over the next 5 to 10 years that don't exist yet? So a lot of things are actually impacting how and what and why companies are adopting new technologies. So as we move on to the next slide, I wanted to get a sense and share what that that emerging technology investment looks like. So if you look at the data from the left-hand side from 2013 all the way to 2018, and notice there's not 2019 or 2020 data here because it's a little bit dated. This data comes from CB Insights. There's about $178 billion that has been invested in emerging technologies alone. And these are all very large investments that these companies are making. And so I was trying to compare that to something that made sense to me. And so what that means is that if I have added the 2019 and 20 numbers, it'll be well over the investment that the United States government invested into the entire spatial program. So this is a 39-year investment of almost $200 billion into putting all the satellites, space communications in space from the United States government. And so the NASA program. So that's how I'm trying to basically let you, the audience, know of the level of investment in just 5 to 6 short years of how much money is being invested into all this new stuff. Now, the reality is that as companies and organizations and even investment groups are putting investment dollars into emerging technologies, there is an expectation of an ROI. So what does that mean? So when we start to look at that as far as from all the emerging technologies and what is in mainstream today, I'm taking a study specifically from Gartner. And for those folks who are not familiar with Gartner, Gartner is a industry analyst group that does multiple research studies across a myriad of industries, software companies, and service providers to be able to provide recommendations to anyone that basically wants that information. So what you're seeing on this screen specifically is the Gartner hype cycle of artificial intelligence for 2019. 2020 is not out yet. But what you're seeing specifically on that slope, there is a whole innovation trigger, peak of inflation, expectation, the trough and disillusionment, and then the slope of enlightenment. And the point of that we're trying to make here is that all that's new emerging technology on the rising of that slope towards the peak of inflated expectation, this is everything that's causing mainstream media to pay attention to. This is also what's the art of the possibilities, new ideas, new concepts. And as those new ideas either get adopted and make changes as part of the organizations or have some type of an ROI that's facilitated back to the business, then, or if not, they start to go down that trough of disillusionment. And then ultimately, as it starts to get a baseline of larger adoption, mass adoption, then it starts to go through the slope of enlightenment and then move on to plateau of productivity. The reason why I'm calling this out specifically is that we are here. And if we looked at a multitude of different types of maturity models across the RPA sector, we have customers, partners, we also have prospects, we have other vendors that have different maturity models and different states of status across the globe. And what we're saying here is that blueprism, amongst many other RPA vendors, intelligent automation providers, are on this slope of enlightenment. If I was to fast forward this number to 2020, we are on this slope of enlightenment. And that means that there are companies and organizations that are realizing the returns of investment from their automation program. So why is that important? Because as we look at legacy technologies, and I'm just randomly picking the 1980s and 90s technologies, where technology themselves has started to standardize across the globe, specifically from personal computers. Again, personal computers at every workstation, across every desk, to maximize productivity of employees. I myself am a former data warehouse engineer. So we start to look at coalescing all that data into one place to be able to write reports from it, to be able to understand trends and analysis. The very beginnings of of collecting data and centralizing that data. And then the connectivity around the internet, being able to take information and access to a multitude of applications across a common protocol, HTTP. And so we talk about pagers. I remember carrying a little beeper with me, and whenever there was information that was needed from me, it'll be transmitted directly to me. The storage of data on CDs or compact discs, a standardization of operating systems to enable personal computers at every workstation, a mass adoption of a computer language, C++, to facilitate creation of common application. And what's really interesting, all those different things also boils down to what we call enterprise resource planning, so ERP. So instead of building custom applications for every company now, there are a suite of standardized applications like Oracle, PeopleSoft, SAP. These older, JD Edwards is also one of them, as well as mainframe applications. These systems is where companies and organizations start to look at standardizing some of their business processes. Yes, they may have to customize different parts of the application to meet their specific verticals or specific demands, but the whole point of it is that there is software out of the box to facilitate that. So this is what's happening when we talk about legacy technologies. And there is billions, potentially even trillions of dollars that has been invested over the past 30 years into these types of information platforms moving forward. Now, as I start to look at the 2020 visions of emerging technologies and beyond, we start to look at quantum computing. Yes, it's still early adopting. I would say that we are in this early point of time to where we start to understand how to leverage quantum computing to solve very hard problems. 3D printing, specifically when we start to look at building solutions at the nanotech level, biometrics, when we start to look at leveraging human characteristics, unique human characteristics to interact with systems and applications digitally. Language. This is probably one of the most exciting sectors when we start to talk about natural language processing, being able to communicate in any language so that systems and applications can understand those language. The distribution of ledgers. We start to talk about blockchains. Digital twins, serverless computing, information technology, all these new emerging technologies is very exciting. But the challenge is how do you take this new stuff and make it work with the old stuff? So when we start to look at that fundamental business problem, we're at an inflection point. So an inflection point is where companies and organizations have to decide what they want and need to invest in. If you invest too early and there's no adoption, you're basically throwing your money away. If you invest too late and your competition has already adopted that type of technology, they may be way ahead of you. So how do you balance that? How do you, in essence, place your bets on the roulette wheel to get the greatest return or to minimize your risk and exposure? So this is what we start to talk about specifically around how to leverage existing technologies, how to place bets in emerging technologies, and manage the two through innovation. So what does that mean? How do I reduce that risk with a high probability of success? So I have 4 major points here that we'll talk about and how different companies have been able to approach this and then the ultimate return of investment from that. But the whole point of this is that when we start to look at leveraging old technology to enable new technology, that is very hard to do. We're not specifically just talking about the new shiny thing that's exciting, but we're focused on creating business value. When we talk about business value, that is measurable business value. And then at the same time, create an environment to experiment, create an environment to fail, create an environment to learn from those failures, to apply that to new product launches, to apply that to new commercialization models, those type of things. And then ultimately, probably the most important thing that when we start to look at how to disrupt is adapting to changing markets. I will tell you that 6 months ago, I was not even planning for a pandemic personally. But as we look at this post-COVID-19 scenario, what worked 6 months ago will not work today. And what worked today will not work 12 to 18 months from now. So how do we, in essence, adapt, be flexible, but still have some controls within our systems and business processes? So what does that mean? For those organizations who have poor execution, limited budget, or maybe are looking at this from a specific use case, or there's no alignment to any type of strategy, and they're just in essence playing with the tool, the outcome is actually very, very limited. In most cases, they lose out on the opportunity. We've seen this. I've personally seen this as a solution engineer here at Blue Prism, facilitating new ideas, new thoughts, new ideas, and new concepts. But the reality is that it's one thing to create an idea and to pursue it. It's a whole nother thing to operationalize it and commercialize it. And so in this situation, you obviously lose out on all kinds of opportunity, the loss of dollar investments and resources, and it's pretty common sense from there. But what we do see, and what I personally see more often, is this. This is a limited risk, limited investment equals limited return. In most cases, what we do see is most companies, organizations, when they want to test intelligent automation, is typically at a departmental level. In some cases, it's more about just solving a pure task automation and not looking at the end-to-end of what's causing the problem or looking at these final outcomes specifically. And in some cases, there's a bit of a lack of commitment into any type of technology platform because some of the decision makers feel like it's still too early to place bets, but you're going to have to. And most of the time, when those situations happen, the end result is limited value creation. And in some of those situations is that as you look at the market and how it's adapting, and your competition may be all in on a specific technique or application or even a platform, there's going to be specific risk factors associated with that, meaning external forces will directly impact how that company will make decisions and not the other way around. So they're basically playing catch up. The most fruitful experience we've seen with this type of alignment is primarily making sure it's a top-down executable action with an appropriate strategy. Meaning when we get involved, Blue Prism and the Innovation Center here, we specifically ask some really tough questions. We engage with many of our customers, partners, and even prospects to ask the question of, what does that intelligent automation journey look like? Where do you want to be 3 to 5 years from now? When we look at the technology landscape that you already have, how are you leveraging them today? What are you not doing? And from those engagements and sessions, we specifically peel back the onion per se and look at what's the drivers of all these business scenarios. Ultimately, what we always ask is companies and organizations sponsor a innovation center internally so that they can create an experiment leveraging Blue Prism's technology against and leverage to use that against all these new emerging technologies. The value of that is that there's new markets, new commercial opportunities when you learn, and also when you apply new technologies to solving billion-dollar problems. What's also interesting about that is that when we start to look at this, and this is a great quote by a great book by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, "What got you here won't get you there." The premise behind this is that things change all the time, and what we're asking our customers, what we're asking our partners to do, and even our prospects when we do engage with them, is the fact that change is inevitable. How you manage that change is important, but how you execute on an idea is paramount. So why is that important? Because as I look at the Gartner hype cycle of all those new technologies that it's on the horizon, that's climbing up the hill of the innovation trigger, what's unique is Blue Prism's uniquely positioned to take advantage of all those new technologies for experimentation, to develop new commercial models, to leverage old technologies and using new technologies to make it more relevant. So that's exciting for us. And so what we're suggesting here is that in many cases, while you may want to experiment these technologies one-off, you may want to start to combine that with your legacy informations and technologies, leveraging an intelligent automation platform like Blue Prism. So with that being said, our call to action in this situation is, please reach out to us. We're excited to engage with you. Blue Prism is engaging the Innovation Center to help companies, organizations just like yours find new ways to adopt technologies to disrupt your industry. At the same time, we're asking companies and organizations to build a culture for learning. This is a unique time and an opportunity for most organizations because there's limited amount of experience in this space, and it's still very fresh and new. And the only way we're ever going to learn and move on and move past this and adopting new capabilities is to experiment and fail a few times. But the most important one is focus on the outcome. And many times my team members and I, we get engaged and people ask specifically, can you tell me a use case? The reality is that what you worked as a specific use case in the past will not be the specific use case in the future. How we solve our problems in the future will be a completely new use case, leveraging new technologies. And so I want to be able to end this presentation by saying thank you. If you do have any questions, please reach out to me. I am available on LinkedIn. I'm also available directly through Blue Prism. I'm excited that you joined this session and look forward to sharing more information like this with you and your organization. Thank you and have a great day.